Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today I'm going to be doing the rotation guide for Black Mage. Now, much like Red Mage, Black Mage doesn't really have a fixed rotation, but there's more or less a guideline that you kind of want to be following through your rotation, and then you're going to be making small adjustments depending on procs, and more specifically movement as well, because Black Mage is one of the jobs that used to be very immobile, but now they have a lot of different abilities that they can use to be more mobile. But that does deviate a little bit from your normal standard rotation, I guess you could say. So certain abilities you might on a dummy want to just use for weaving and stuff like that and to not overcap resources. But in an actual fight you might want to be saving certain procs or certain resources like your Xenoglossy, just specifically for specific types of movement, because some phases might require for you to move quite a bit, stuff like that, where a normal slide cast wouldn't cut it. So Black Mage, in essence, is relatively simple. You have a dot called Thunder 3, basically you want to keep that up on the boss at all times, and you have two different types of spells. You have ice spells and you have fire spells. Whenever you're using fire spells, you're not going to be regenerating mana, so eventually you're just going to run out. But then when you go into your ice phase, that's where you're going to be regenerating all of your mana. And then in between all of that, you do want to just refresh your Thunder dot, as it basically ticks down. Before it was pretty much impossible to like use it during your fire phase, because you would either not have enough mana or you'd run out of your buff duration before you would like be able to like reapply your Thunder. So usually pre 5.0 you would reapply your Thunder in the ice phase, but right now, because the Astral Fire and Umbral Ice buff timer has been extended by a few seconds, it's actually possible to just reapply your Thunder wherever you want now. And as long as you don't lose out on a tick of mana in your ice phase, if you reapply your Thunder at the end there, then you can still reapply your Thunder in the fire phase. But that's going a little bit too much into detail. For now, we're just going to talk about like how you should kind of play it. So other than this, Black Mage has a few different things that kind of come together with keeping up this Umbral Ice and Astral Fire buff. So as long as the buff is ticking, you can use a spell or an ability, I guess you could say, called Enochian. Now Enochian is something that you want to have up 100% of the time. As long as you don't drop out of your Astral Fire or your Umbral Ice buff, Enochian will just stay active and you don't have to think about it at all. It's only when you drop your buff that you basically have to reapply Enochian. Now Enochian will do two things for you. First of all, it'll give you a 50% increase in damage, so that's where you definitely want to have it up. But not only than that, it also gives you access to 4 new spells: Blizzard 4, Fire 4, Despair and Umbral Soul. The Umbral Soul is not really that important, it's only important for downtime, but the other 3 are really important. And other than that, every 30 seconds you're also going to be granted a Polyglot stack. This stacks 2 times, and you can use this on one of 2 abilities. You can either use it on a Foul, which is an AoE ability, but when we're talking about single target fights, we're going to be using this on Xenoglossy, which is also an instant ability. So this will allow you to move, this will also allow you to weave. So if you know where the movement is in the fight, you can basically save Xenoglossies for those specific phases as well. Other than this, we still have a few other skills as well. We have Sharp Cast. This will make it so that the next proc is going to be guaranteed. In general, there's 2 procs that Black Mage can get, which is your Thunder proc, which is called Thundercloud, and your Fire proc, which is your Fire Starter. Now basically what these 2 procs allow you to do is the Thundercloud proc allows you to cast Thunder instantly, but it will also increase the damage that it deals by quite a amount. So essentially, using Sharp Cast on Thunder is the biggest damage increase that you can have. But essentially the damage increase is not big enough for you to warrant holding Sharp Cast, so it's better to get the extra usage of Sharp Cast over the course of a fight and use it on a Fire proc than holding it specifically for an extra Thunder proc. Now getting a Fire proc or a Fire Starter will allow you to use Fire 3 instantly, and this will basically make it so that you have another way to keep up your Astral Fire buff, because when you're in your Fire window, all you're going to be doing really is spam Fire 4. You're going to be using a Fire 1 to reset the timer on your Astral Fire buff, and then you can do some more Fire 4s, and then of course Fire 3 will also put the timer back to the maximum. So what you could do if there is too much movement going on, or you have to weave some stuff like a Xenoglossy or a Thunder in there, and the timer is getting really tight on your fire phase, you can just use the fire starter proc to kind of extend that phase to a more comfortable amount of time left. Last but not least, we have Ley Lines as well as Mana Font. Ley Lines is basically your attack speed buff. It's that little circle that Black Mage puts on the ground, and as long as the Black Mage stands in it, they get a very high attack speed boost. So basically you want to use this on cooldown whenever possible. Of course, if you have to use it at the end of a phase or something, hold it for the next one. Or if there's a phase where there's a lot of movement and you can't stay in the Ley Lines, hold it as well. But in general, if you can get like a pretty decent amount of time spent in the Ley Lines, it's best to just use it on cooldown so that you don't lose a usage over the course of the fight. And then Mana Font is the old Manification. Basically all it does now is just give you straight up mana. Back in the day it would also reduce your HP by a little bit, but right now it just gives you mana. And basically what you're going to be doing with this is at the end of your fire window, when you drop to 0 mana, you're going to be using Mana Font, and then you can use an extra Fire 4 and an extra Despair. So let's take a look at what you're kind of going to be doing in this ice phase and this fire phase. So let's start off with the fire phase. So essentially what you want to do is you want to start the fire phase by using Fire 3 to switch from ice to fire, because we're going to be starting the fight in ice, by the way. So we use Fire 3 to switch into our fire phase. We can use 3 Fire 4s if we don't have our attack speed buff up. Before, we generally want to use Fire 1 to reset our timer on Astral Fire. We can use another 3 Fire 4s, and then we can finish out the phase with a Despair. Despair is kind of like your phase finisher for the fire phase. It does say that it costs 10,000 MP. That's not really true. Basically what Despair will do is it will drain all of your mana to 0. So it doesn't matter how much mana you have, it'll just go to 0. The minimum cost to use it is 800 mana. So basically at the end of your fire phase, you want to make sure that you're going to be left over with 800 or a little bit more mana so that you can use that Despair. Now the reason why it's 800 or a little bit more, in general, you're going to be ending your fire phase on either 1200 mana or on 800 mana, depending on if you had to hardcast a Thunder 3, because Thunder 3 is 400 mana. That's also the reason why if you use Thunder 3 towards the end of your ice window and you don't get a mana tick before going into fire, you can't actually hardcast Thunder 3 underneath fire. You'll only be able to make use of the Thundercloud proc, because Thundercloud makes it so that your Thunder 3 mana cost is 0 basically. So as long as you don't start your fire phase with the full mana, never hardcast the Thunder 3, because you lose out on the Despair at the end, or a Fire 4, which neither of them is really a good option. Then when you go into your Blizzard phase or your Ice phase, once you're done, well, once you basically drained all your mana, you're going to be using Blizzard 3 to switch into Ice. You're going to be using Blizzard 4 to give yourself Umbral Souls. These are basically 3 stacks that make your fire spells cost less, and what allows you to actually use those 6 Fire 4s inside the fire window. And then you're going to be using 1 filler move. So basically Blizzard 3, Blizzard 4, a filler move, Fire 3 to go back into fire. And of course, if you need extra GCDs inside this Blizzard window, that's possible as well. For example, say you need to refresh your Thunder and your Polyglot is about to overcap. You can just use the Xenoglossy and a Thunder 3 inside there before going back into the fire phase. If possible, I always like to refresh my Thunder inside this Blizzard phase, because it does make it so that you have a longer timer left on your Astral Fire buff, because Astral Fire is really the only phase where your buff timer can be a little bit tight at times. So being able to refresh Thunder inside Blizzard is good, but of course you only want to refresh your Thunder buff if it runs out, or if your Thundercloud proc is about to run out. So if those two aren't met, so say for example you have 10 seconds left on your Thunder and you don't have a Thundercloud proc, then you just go into fire and you refresh it into fire. But say you only have like 3 seconds left on Thunder, you can basically refresh it into that Ice phase. And I think that pretty much covers all of the different abilities that we're mainly going to be using as a Black Mage in our rotation. Of course, we do have some other spells as well, like Ethereal Manipulation, Mana Ward and that kind of stuff. But that doesn't really impact our rotation all too much. So let's start with the opener, and then I'll kind of show you a rotation on the dummy and explain some things. So for Black Mage, there's a bunch of different openers that you can use depending on fight length and what fight it is as well. But for today, we're just going to be taking a look at the highest potency one, which is the No Blizzard 4 opener, and it goes a little bit like this. So we're starting out with Sharpcast, going into Blizzard 3, because we do want to be full mana. Making sure we use our Enochian, of course, because it's very important that we do use that as soon as possible. This is where we would normally use our potion, but I'm not going to be poting, so I'm just going to use nothing there. And then right before our timer runs out, we're going to finish our Despair, using Mana Font to get an extra Fire 4 and Despair in there. And then when we go back into our Ice phase, we're just about going to have enough time remaining to get our Xenoglossy in there. And then it's back to Fire, and then it's basically what I talked about before, refreshing your Thunder as necessary, using as many Fire Force as possible inside that Fire phase, making sure that you don't drop your Astral Fire, so that's why I'm doing a Fire 1 right here. And then basically just repeats itself from there, using your stuff on cooldown as much as you can, of course making sure that you have enough mana, and then right here using my Thundercloud proc, because the Thundercloud proc was about to run out, meaning that I could use that one instead of like just waiting for the dot to tick out. Basically with Thunder reapplication, either use it right before the Thundercloud is about to run out, or use it right as your dot is about to drop off. That's kind of like the rule that I like to use for that. And right here I'm going to reapply my Thunder, because the dot did just drop. Gonna use my Fire so that I can Swift Cast the Despair. Using Swift Cast on Despair is the best thing you can do, as Despair is the longest cast time skill that you have. So that's why I like using it on that. Ley Lines are back up again, so we're going to use those. As I said before, if you can get Ley Lines off on cooldown and stay in it for a long enough period of time, always do it, so that you don't lose that extra usage over the course of the whole fight. And then here we're going to be finishing our Fire, and then I can refresh my Thunder inside Ice, which is, in my opinion, the best. Using our Blizzards, I'm going to use one Polyglot Slack so that we don't overcap, because overcapping Polyglots is a really big damage loss, as Polyglot is a really potent skill to have. But since we're on a dummy, I don't really need much to like weave or to move around, so that's why I haven't really been using it. Thunder is about to run out here, so we're going to refresh with a Thunder 3 proc. Gonna use my Fire proc so that I can Swift Cast the Despair again. If you don't have the Fire proc there, then just use your Despair normally, of course. But since I had it anyways, might as well use it. And then we go back into our Fire phase. Gonna use my Thundercloud proc after this, because it's gonna run out, and the Thunder dot was about to drop as well. And then it just kinda keeps going like this. Fire 1 to refresh the Astral Fire buff. My Thundercloud is about to run out as well, so I'm gonna use Fire 3 to refresh the Astral Fire, Thundercloud, and then this still gives us enough time to finish out the window. I could have technically used like a Xenoglossy there to get Ley Lines off or something, so that I could get that immediately on instead of using it during Ice, but that's pretty much all up to you. So yeah, that's pretty much Black Mage. On a dummy it's not super interesting to play, but in a fight it's really interesting to optimize your movement and all of your instant casting spells, as it is a little bit depending on your procs, but since Sharpcast is on such a short cooldown now, since Xenoglossy is here now as well, triple cast is usually just being used as a damaging tool, unless there's actually a phase where you have to move a lot. Then you can use your triple cast for that, but mostly it's a damaging tool because you do have so many other procs and resources that you can work with now. So that's pretty much Black Mage. Hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.